Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rates and Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. I will be joined shortly by my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Really excited for today's show. We are pre-recording the show, so we won't be able to interact with you guys live. But if you would, please like, share, and comment on the video. And if you have any questions or comments pertaining to the video, by all means, still go ahead and make those comments and address those questions to us, and we'll try to maybe circle back and get them answered at a later time. I'm very excited for today's show. We're getting ready to talk to, well, I don't want to get into it too fast. Let me just go ahead and bring on my co-host first, and then we'll get into the introductions about what it is that we're going to talk about. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, Chuck?
Rico, we're doing great. I am so honored to have our guest today, David Hillman, who is he's the Vice President of Integrated Technology over at Navistar. And I am so excited because Navistar has come out with some great stuff, proprietary engines, the latest one through the relationship with Scania. We're going to hear more about that. And my understanding from one of our previous guests is that Scania has invented this engine or developed this engine that is the cat's meow. We finally may have solved the problems that we have been having in the industry since 2008. We may just get ahead of it now. And I think David has got some great information to share with our listeners. So with no further ado, let's bring on David Hillman. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. Pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for having me today. One quick correction right off the bat. As of all of 3 weeks ago, we have buried the Navistar name to the history books. So we're just referring to ourselves as international. So that's quite all right. It's new to everyone. We have to put $1 in the cup every time we say the Navistar word.
It's like the swear jar now, huh?
But and hey, it's really kind of a reflection, and probably the origin story that maybe we can start with about the new S13 Powertrain is that with a legacy that goes back all the way to the 1830s. Many of your listeners may not know that we are now a division of Volkswagen. So Volkswagen bought us in 2021, and Volkswagen, before they bought us, they already owned Scania out of Sweden, MAN out of Germany, and they've got a commercial vehicles division down in Brazil. So Volkswagen kind of put the four of us together in a group called Traton. And so you'll sometimes hear Traton, but with all of that, I mean, our customer-facing brand has been international since 1902. So the recent announcement, and again, I don't fault anyone for still calling us Navistar, but we're trying really hard to just say, you know what, that made sense in the 80s, perhaps, but it never was meant to be customer-facing. So we're happy just to be known as international these days. So
okay.
Well, welcome back to the international. As a little boy, I grew up, my dad had an international truck. It was a curbside delivery truck. And I spent hours and hours in that thing. Its name was Big Bertha. And so at 7 or 8 years old, I became very, very fond of international trucks.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of, maybe something that may resonate a bit more with some of your listeners is, we had a real diverse portfolio throughout most of the 20th century, including the beloved Scout.
Yes.
And what's getting kind of some attention in the news these days, since we are now fully owned by Volkswagen, they acquired the rights to the Scout brand through us. So they are relaunching Scout here in 18 to 24 months, relaunching that as a consumer product, an SUV and a pickup. And that came through because we owned the rights to the Scout brand. going all the way back to when we last produced them in 1980. So that might be another thing that people recognize. So,
oh yeah,
Volkswagen is got a really broad reach, because if I'm not mistaken, they also Porsche is under them, Volkswagen,
Audi,
Porsche, Audi, and Lamborghini.
Exactly, right? So Rico, I sit by the phone waiting for the folks from Lamborghini to call me up and ask me my opinion about what they're doing, and curiously enough, they never call. But
Man,
but they are distant corporate cousins. More pragmatically, we do a lot more with our Scania and MAN and Volkswagen Brazil custom colleagues. But like I said, a boy can dream. I would love to have the Lamborghini folks call and ask my thoughts.
If I'm not mistaken, David, does Lamborghini and International kind of have the same DNA way back in the fact that they both started with farm tractors?
Ferruccio Lamborghini started as a he was a farm tractor manufacturer, and the story that I understand is that he was displeased with a car that he had purchased from Ferrari, and when he didn't get the sort of support he felt he deserved, he decided to do them one better and make his own. And so the fact that International used to make the Farmall and a lot of farm implements, and that was really our legacy from a century or more ago. Lamborghini has a very similar background. Also, Porsche made a diesel farm tractor as well. So
really,
there's some interesting threads in there in our collective histories.
Now, does International, are they still involved in agriculture at all?
No, when we went through some real troubling times, boy, and I was in junior high, right? But in the early 80s, we were, if you think about it, to be slightly dramatic, we were fighting a war on four fronts.
Right.
And that's, history would say, that's not a good position to be in, right? So we were fighting Deere with agriculture equipment and Caterpillar with construction equipment, the big three with our Scout, and the commercial trucks like Peterbilt and Mack and such. And our commercial truck and diesel group was the only one at the time that was making money. So we sold off harvesting equipment, I think in 1982, construction equipment around the same time. We couldn't find a buyer for the Scout, so we just stopped producing them. And that's how we still owned the rights to the Scout brand. But we kept moving on with International trucks and engines. And that's when the Navistar name became our face to Wall Street. But it was never a product facing name, which is always why it was so confusing, and why I think collectively we're glad to just say, hey, Navistar doesn't have a place anymore. It's International, and we're part of Volkswagen.
That's going to be a great marketing campaign. It's just to play on all that and educate the public.
Yeah, it is fun. I mean, so a little bit about me. I started my career as an engineer, but I've been with International Motors for over 26 years now. So I've seen some highs and some lows and everything in between. And what I frequently find myself telling new employees that we've brought on board is just that they're joining an exciting company at a perfect time, because it feels good when the wind is at your back and the arrow is pointing up. We do feel very optimistic about where we're headed next.
Yeah, and you know what? As a potential consumer, anyways, I would be. I'm excited for you. I really am.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it's one of those things where I often talk about how the truck industry is fascinating, right? It's as big and as important as it is. It tends to also be a fairly tight-knit community. We share a lot of the same backgrounds and interests and challenges, and even though we compete with with other brands, we all kind of work together to kind of make sure that the industry gets the sort of recognition and understanding with the public that I think is exactly what your podcast does, right? I know you're speaking to a trucking audience, but I think it's available for people not in the industry to maybe get a window into the sort of things that we do here.
Yeah.
So Dave, so just a quick question to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of everything.
Yeah.
So what is the S13? Let's just start there. What is it?
Perfect. Way to cut to the chase, Rico. So the S13 is what we call our new integrated powertrain, and it's got 3 elements to it: a 13-liter engine,
Right.
14-speed automated mechanical transmission, and our dual-stage aftertreatment system that were all designed by the same team to work together. Sort of they grew together, so they go together, and that's
Right.
kind of our punchline there for those 3 things. And it's the result of a massive investment that, frankly, when we were independent, we could never afford to do this level of investment before.
Right.
But now that we can spread the volume and spread the expense across Scania in Sweden, MAN in Germany, Volkswagen in Brazil, and international in North America, right? Because our footprint became very complementary to those other brands because we've got a very strong presence in Canada, a very strong presence in Mexico, and obviously our roots and our heritage in the United States. So it was an investment that we couldn't do on our own, but now that we're part of Volkswagen's Traton group, it made perfect sense for us to throw in and develop a global powertrain that all the brands could leverage.
So I'm going to kind of stay along the lines of the rudimentary questions and just see where it takes us. So I ask you, what is it? So how is it different? How is it different than what's out there already?
So great straight man, Rico. The way I always like to start discussing this powertrain is that this is the first new powertrain clean sheet design for North America that was developed in the post SCR realm. In other words, there was a lot of discussion about SCR back in the 2010 changeover. Now that SCR has been widely adopted and it's proven its effectiveness, as a group, we stood back and we said, how best do we go about solving customer problems? And a couple of the biggest problems that the industry faces, regardless of who's making the engine, is EGR coolers tend to be a weak link in the chain.
Yep.
Variable geometry turbos tend to be a bit finicky. So we approached it saying, hey, if we can design the weakest link out of our chain, it just makes our chain stronger, right? To use that analogy. So we said, since SCR has proven its effectiveness, let's lean into that. Let's use SCR. So we removed, by design, the EGR cooler, and we replaced the variable geometry turbo with just a simple fixed wastegate turbo, like the 1980s called, and they want their turbo back, right? It's very simple. My favorite party trick: you tilt the hood on one of our new LTs or HX models that has this powertrain, and you call over the service techs, and their eyes get big as saucers, especially on the hot side of the engine when they look at it, and they go, hey, I can see a block there. I can see what's going on, right? Because those EGR coolers, no matter whose they are, right, they take up a lot of space and they gum up a lot of things. So by removing that, it kind of frees up a lot of space, and it speaks to the simplicity, which was a clear aim of ours, that simplifying the design was going to really help the service techs to do their job better. But simplifying the design was not a simple task. And I say that because, I'll get the question frequently from fleets that, hey, if taking off the EGR cooler was the greatest thing since sliced bread, well, why isn't everyone doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And the short answer is that it requires this sizable investment. And
research and development.
Yeah. And because you can't do one thing in isolation. All these intricate parts work together, right? So we could only design the EGR cooler off or out of our system if we designed the after treatment to go along with it. So the way I always describe what's going on in cylinder is that there are the two primary pollutants that we are obligated by law to control, and that's NOx generation and particulate matter. Those are two things that we have to control, and fundamentally they're like on a teeter-totter. If one's going up, the other's going down.
Right.
So by design, we said, you know what, we're not going to try to control NOx in cylinder. We're not going to ask the engine to clean up its own mess. So we're going to let NOx go as high as it needs to.
Okay.
But that means that particulate matter goes way down, right? Which is a benefit. You're not generating the black sooty smoke. And really the process that gets you there is that we're not recirculating any kind of dead air into the cylinder. So each compression stroke of the cylinder is full of oxygenated air, so it burns the fuel more completely, right? So it burns it completely, so there's very little soot, which is unburned fuel, effectively.
Right.
But NOx goes way up. So since NOx is so high in cylinder, you got to take care of it somehow. And that's where our after treatment system that has 2 doses of DEF comes into play. So there's a dose of DEF right in the downpipe, right after the turbocharger housing,
Right.
where the speed is the greatest and the temperature is hottest. So that helps with the catalyst the catalyst process right there. And then within the after treatment module itself, there is a second dose of DEF. And it's important for your listeners to know that while that means DEF consumption does increase with the S13, it doesn't double. Just because we got two squirts of it doesn't mean we're doubling it compared to the rest of the industry.
Okay.
So to sum up, because I there's a lot to unpack there. I think the simplest thing to remember is there's no EGR cooler.
Right.
The variable geometry turbo is replaced with a waste-gated turbo, and the after treatment module handles all the NOx so that the engine doesn't have to.
So by that being a much more simplified, just a question, I'm not sure if you have the answer, but it just popped in my mind. By it being a much simpler turbo system, we're not without all the other, like you said, the variable and all that stuff. So this, I'm assuming that maybe the parts for with failure and everything should be a little bit less expensive than what the normal turbos are going for nowadays.
Yes, 100%. In fact, one of my favorite examples of that, because hey, I'm very respectful of the fact that we're damn good at designing and manufacturing trucks and powertrains, but it's our customers really that operate them and have
Right.
a real close perspective on how they're performing. I've had a fleet director stop me kind of at this point of my spiel and said, you know what? Let me make sure I heard you correct. There's no EGR cooler. No, sir.
Right.
You've replaced the variable geometry turbo with the fixed turbo. Yes, sir. You've just saved me $10,000 per unit in my 6-year ownership cycle. Now, professional driver on closed course, your results may vary, type of legalese.
Right. Your knowledge.
But for this customer, he just quickly did in his head, in a 6-year ownership cycle, he would typically go through 2 EGR coolers at around $3,000 a pop, and at least 1 turbo at $4,000 a pop. And so he said that's where he got to $10,000. So he was applying it towards his ownership cycle. We've got some customers that keep their trucks for 1 million miles or 12 years or more. I mean, when you get to the vocational market, it's very different. So every fleet is going to have their own unique experience, but we designed it that no matter how you're operating the vehicles and what loads they are, you should expect to have simplified maintenance and less downtime.
I got a couple other questions to go back, just to kind of go back just a little bit, because you said it's a 13 liter, and I know that different other manufacturers, a lot of times you'll have different bigger models or whatever. So is it strictly going to be the 13, or you guys have plans to go a larger engine?
No, I think so no, the plan is this 13-liter powertrain that we have, we go between, well, we max out at 515 horsepower, 1850 pounds-feet of torque.
That's pretty significant.
It's pretty significant. Yeah. I mean, hey, it wasn't that long ago that you couldn't get anything close to that level of
Right.
power and torque without having a 15-liter or larger bore. The whole industry, I think, not just international, but I think you'll find the entire industry. We all have our own proprietary 13-liter engine because that's the meat of the marketplace.
Yeah.
And then in the case of international, we've got a great working relationship with Cummins. We still source the 15-liter X15 from Cummins. And for our medium duty product and like our school buses, for example, we have both Cummins sourced power or battery electric, which is really kind of taking hold. So I think that's sort of a reflection of where the rest of the industry is going as well. I think all of the truck manufacturers are going to have a 13-liter powertrain that they call their own, and Cummins has a place there for higher and lower.
Right.
The one thing I will say, we're starting to find some customers that say, you know what, I was always buying a Cummins X15 because I felt I needed it, but with the way the S13 generates power, we hit peak torque at 900 RPMs, and since we're putting it to the ground with our 14-speed transmission, those two features combine to where we've had some customers come back to us and say, "Whoa, I was right next to my buddy in the same fleet, where he knew he had a 15-liter spec that his buddy was driving, and he walked past him up a hill just because of the way the power gets delivered, and we hit that peak torque at 900 RPMs." So I would say don't think that if it isn't a 13-liter, it's not going to have the guts, because a lot of our drivers are saying, I can't believe the way it puts power to the ground.
Right. Next question. How soon or when is this going to be available to the general public?
Okay, great question. We went into volume production right around this time last year. Oh. So the first customer deliveries really started to hit the street late 2023 and then into January of 2024. Earlier this year is when they first started coming on stream. And so we've now got over, I was just looking at the numbers, nearly 6,500 out on the streets today in the US, Mexico, and Canada.
Okay.
And then globally, Scania first started, they launched first about a year before us. And MAN, I believe I have this right, is going into production like right around now. So first Scania, then International, then MAN, and Volkswagen in Brazil will be the fourth in line. But as we sit here today, we've got over 4 billion customer miles driven with this powertrain. Whoa. The Scania version is slightly different than ours, and ours is slightly different from MAN, but it's very minor differences, not only in logos and badging, but some of the wiring harnesses. And we have onboard diagnostics requirements in North America that don't exist in Europe. But fundamentally, the hardware set is shared by the group. And we've got, like I said, over 4 billion, coming up on 4.5 billion customer miles driven. So it's getting some real world miles out there.
And some other information that I read, I ran across. I know you were saying it's going to take 2 squirts of the DEF fluid and everything, but it also, from what I understand, but you're supposed to be getting improved fuel economy with this engine.
Oh my, yes. We went very aggressive with our fuel economy messaging because we felt we had to really grab customers' attention. And part of our internal discussions were, hey, are we saying too much? Are we being too aggressive? And the great news is if anything, we've probably been under promising and over delivering, which let me tell you, I tell this to my team every week. Thank goodness we're doing that, because it's better than the other way around.
Yeah, the U-Pod approach always works.
Absolutely. I'd rather let the results speak for themselves, but we're getting best in class fuel economy. We're getting killer fuel economy. I was just at there was a large trade show this past week where we kind of had fleets coming up out of the woodwork saying, I'm hearing about this in the industry, or I talked to my dealer, or I've demoed one of these things, and they either had great results of their own to share, or they'd heard about from someone else and they wanted to hear more, which is again, it's exciting. It keeps me gainfully employed, which I kind of appreciate. But really, the fuel economy results are the thing that we find really speak to the owner. Trucks are expensive these days.
Absolutely.
I don't care whose they are, right? It's expensive. Getting into the truck industry is not for the faint of heart. It is. It's a tough job, and you're spending a lot of money, and you're typically only making money when the wheels are turning. So having uptime where the vehicle is performing, and also how much it costs per mile to run it are two of the biggest things. So by designing a simpler engine,
right,
we feel we've hit the first thing, where we want to deliver greater uptime. And then the other one, we went through the design, because it was a clean sheet design, with a fine-tooth comb. One of my favorite examples is we operate the high pressure fuel pump at a lower pressure, just because it reduces parasitic losses, and we can still get what we need to do. And we've got a 23-to-1 compression ratio. So we're really squeezing it down in cylinder. And that's part of how we get the efficiency. But we are seeing, we're seeing some amazing fuel economy. I would say, so much of it comes from where you've been, right? Because it's usually relative. Right. You've got some people that have full aero skirts and are used to getting good fuel economy. This is improving their fuel economy. One of my favorite examples, which I think is kind of fun to talk about. We've got someone with a concrete mixer getting over 7.5 miles per gallon.
Whoa! Wow.
Now concrete mixers, they don't go long distances. They don't have any aero effects anywhere, and they do a lot of idling. It's just their job, their duty cycle. But this fleet really wanted to talk to us because they were getting, it's not quite double, but maybe 3 miles per gallon improvement. And I spent a lot of my career on the vocational side of our business. So I got a soft spot for dump trucks and mixers and snow plows. And I'd be the first to tell you that fuel economy performance is not what your typical vocational customer asks for first. I've got to have durability. I've got to be able to maneuver a job site. I've got to have it simple and uptime and lightweight to deliver the payload. And if you check all those boxes and then deliver compelling fuel economy, well, now you've got a story. And that's I'm thrilled that that's where we're at with the S13 Powertrain.
That's great, because I know in the mixer business, delivering cement, there's no room for downtime, because when that truck goes down, that drum stops turning, and that can get really expensive.
My favorite. So I get the opportunity to travel around the U.S. and Canada and into Mexico a bit, talking to customers and talking with dealers. And my favorite example that I give when I'm doing some dealer training is, I never bring props, but I ask them to mentally think of a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, and a bucket of wet concrete on the table in front of me. And I ask them, which is the most perishable thing, right? A gallon of milk might last a couple weeks in your fridge. A loaf of bread, maybe, 3 or 4 weeks. But a bucket of wet concrete, when it leaves the batch plant, depending on the admixture and some other things, but in general, you've got about 70 or 80 minutes before bad things happen and it sets up, right? So
Yeah,
it's not quite like Bugs Bunny where he freezes and he can't move, but
not
it's
far off.
it's it's a very perishable asset. And you're right. If you've got a truck down by the side of the road with a load of mud in the back of the barrel, uh, someone's going to notice and raise some cane over it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can't afford it. So that brings me to a couple of questions here. Number one, idling. With these ever since 2008, and we found out the hard way. We bought some. Posted emission trucks that we hadn't had experience with. The first batch we bought, and they were domiciled down in Western Canada where it's real cold, and the drivers did a lot of idling. It was one of your competitors' brands. I don't want to mention the name, but we had nothing but issues with it because a lot of it, because I think the trucks were garbage, but I also think that the drivers were idling too much. And how do these things? And I know we shouldn't idle. I get it, but we do sometimes. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, Chuck, we get that question quite a bit, because another fun fact about the design of our system, we don't have in our after treatment module what's called a seventh injector, right? I don't know if that's a term you're familiar with, but most systems, in fact, systems we've used in the past have a diesel line that goes into the after treatment,
Right.
so that if you fill up with some soot, you can dump diesel in there and kind of do the easy bake oven routine and bake out the soot and kind of blow it out the tailpipe.
Yeah.
The S13 integrated powertrain does not have a seventh injector. That's another reason why we're very efficient. The only place diesel is going in our powertrain is in cylinder to generate power.
So,
So let me
go
just
ahead,
finish the
finish.
thought there, Rico. So the reason we don't have one is back to when I was talking about the teeter-totter. NOx is very high, so we take care of that with DEF.
Right.
PMs are very low. We're generating very, very little soot in cylinder. So the rest of the system downstream, whether it's through the turbocharger or into the after treatment, is getting very, very little soot. So we don't have the concern over soot trapping, to the extent that we eliminated the diesel oxidation catalyst, so we don't have one in our after treatment. We don't have a seventh injector, and we say, depending on fuel consumed. So the thing to remember, if you're getting 8.2 miles per gallon or better, your diesel particulate filter, which is what catches the soot, should last, for the Canadians in the audience, 1 million clicks. For those of us on this side of the border, about 650,000 miles. So most of your on highway fleets will never have to touch it in their first ownership cycle. And for our vocational customers that do a lot of idling, they're not putting nearly as much miles on.
No,
and there's really, we expect they won't have to. So the service interval is much less than 650,000 miles. I from memory, I'll have to double check this, but it's in the 425,000 miles for like someone that's only getting 5 miles per gallon. But again, remember where I said that mixer was getting 7.5? We tell vocational customers that, look, we'll help you keep an eye on it, but we don't see that you'll even have to touch it in your first ownership cycle. And if you do, your friendly local international dealer can handle it on a PM, on a maintenance basis.
So it sounds like with this new technology, with this engine, when somebody brings a truck in, because there is a problem, and it's inevitable. Every engine has issues of some sort, new ones. So you've got a sensor problem or whatever. Since I guess the last 16 years, they've been at times very difficult to diagnose. And is this going, with this engine technology, will it be easier to diagnose problems?
That's a hard one to say. I'd like to say, because of the things we did to simplify it, that it's reasonable to expect it would be easier to troubleshoot and diagnose. But let me give you give you an example of how we approach this with the launch, right? Because of the reputation we had from 15 years ago, because of where we feel an obligation to give our best and brightest to our customers, we recognize that we couldn't even handle a footfall, right? We couldn't even get close to the line of where someone would throw a flag on the play. So when we launched this, we also surrounded it, metaphorically in bubble wrap with an uptime approach, where we said, you know what we're going to do, if we know that in a quick troubleshoot that it's not something we can do right there in frame, we will swap out an engine or swap out a transmission, get the customer back on the road, and then bring the troubled component back to our technical experts to break it down and really understand it. And I heard a metric just a few weeks ago, so I think it's still relevant. We removed 11 engines. So in the last year, less than one a month. And of those 11 engines, 8 of them were confirmed that, yeah, this is the sort of thing that in normal times you wouldn't remove the engine and replace it. You would have just made the repair right there in the shop. But because we were learning too, we took kind of the over cautious approach of removing the engine. And of the other 3, I think one of them was a process issue, and there were a couple early design things that we caught early in manufacturing, and those were 2 that had kind of slipped the pen beforehand. So we're very encouraged with the way the design is behaving out there in the wild. And we've also done a lot to train our dealer service technines to be able to help handle this. Does that kind of get at what you were kind of asking about?
It does. And the only other thing that adds on to that, because I've been out of the I have not been operating a fleet for 2.5 years. But I remember all the problems we had before I sold. And the other problem we did have, and I don't know, I guess it was a global problem for everybody, and maybe you've gotten beyond this already. How are you making out with parts availability for these?
That was going to be my next question.
Sorry, Rico.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, and it's hey, I mean, if you look at the industry in total, my proxy is like the airline industry, right? If you get on a flight anymore these days, you don't have the luxury of an empty seat on either side of the airline industry was forced to get efficiency. And I start there because that's kind of the same thing that's happened within commercial vehicles, within the trucking industry. You can't afford to just have 8 trucks parked by the fence in case you need them. So everyone's had to get more efficient. Same with the way we have to run our factories. And that has caused, there have been issues like earlier this year, there are 2 primary mirror suppliers to the North American truck industry. And one of them had a catastrophic fire at one of their factories. And that was a challenge, right? The good news is we were able to react and kind of get back up to speed. But those are the sort of things that I think are present in our industry. Specific to international on this powertrain, I'd like to amplify the fact that while it is a global powertrain, we have, by law and by obligation, and also to keep uptime, we have invested a lot in localization.
Okay.
So the engines and transmissions are all built at our Huntsville, Alabama powertrain plant.
Oh.
So we build these here. We have sourced the same tools and processes. We sent, the plant manager is going to scold me for not having committed this to memory. But I want to say we sent over 50 hourly people, not just executives, but hourly people from our shop floor in Huntsville over to Scania's factory, where they were assembling these engines to learn and to cross-train and things like that. And I believe now MAN is sending their people to Huntsville, right? So we've got very, not just similar, but exactly the same processes and tools.
Great.
But because we're localized, we are insulating ourselves from kind of those global supply chain disruptions. Like, remember when that ship was cocked across the Suez Canal, right? Or you've got a strike at a seaport. I mean, there are things way beyond anyone's control here on this call, right? That it's the world we live in. And so we do a lot to make sure that we have localized source of supply, but also because of the commonality, we can, when necessary, cross share service parts or things, right? So we haven't had to yet, but we've already talked about, hey, if there's a disruption for Huntsville, we can temporarily source things out of Nuremberg, where MAN makes their engines in Germany, or Södertälje in Sweden, where Scania does it. And you can do some heroics to keep the line going, where if you just had parts that only worked for your powertrain, you couldn't do that, right? So it opens up a world of possibilities for us to help not only keep our production plants running, but to keep our customers running with parts availability as well.
Well, this sounds really, it sounds exciting. This is the best thing that I have heard in a long time. Now, I did hear nothing but incredible stories about I guess it's the predecessor of this motor. Is it the A26?
Well, we had a string of them that, yes, were predecessors to this. The A26 is the one that that was the immediate predecessor to the S13.
Right. And I've heard the company that I sold Traffics, they did buy some and they love them. And, people that I've talked to since you brought them out that were operating them, everybody, swears these things are probably the best engine out there. Compared to everybody else. They're damn good engines and delivering incredible fuel mileage and great power and reliability. What are you going to do with those? Are you going to mothball those, or are you going to continue to offer them?
Oh, so the A26 actually, well, first of all, I'm flattered and I'm grateful that we want to earn customers' business the right way. And the nice thing is, I'm hearing many of those same kind of customer feedbacks about the S13. Back to the A26, it actually was performing incredibly well for us, but because it was not a global answer the way the S13 is, we had more risk of parts availability. We couldn't rely on someone else, right? It was just us, and because we didn't have the economies of scale with the A26 that we enjoy with the S13, our cost to deliver the A26 was very high, and so it was with kind of mixed emotion that we said, you know what, it's worked really well for us. We went into production with the A26, if memory serves, about seven or 8 years ago.
Yes, I remember that.
We have built the last A26. In fact, the Huntsville engine plant that built the A26s, we took out that line and we added transmissions, which is why we now call it the Huntsville Powertrain plant. But we have built the last A26 that we're going to build. We've got several of them staged because we're still putting them in like snowplow chassis through the end of this year. But we've completely shifted, and our focus is on the S13 from a new production standpoint. And yet our A26, we have customers that run engines for 10, 15, 20 years in some cases, right? We've got a lot of like state and provincial plow customers that when they buy a plow truck, they expect to be able to run it for 15 or more years.
Yeah, they only
and
run
so
it
we're going to keep supporting those. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So but you guys are pretty much all in on the S13.
We are all in, man. We've slid all the chips in, and again, I think it's it was a very expensive endeavor, right? Not just for us, but for our colleagues across the group. And the good news is it feels like it's paying off. I do tell my team on a regular basis, we are not hanging the mission accomplished banner up just yet, right? We got to
Right.
keep earning the business the right way. You know the reference, Rico, right? I mean, we're excited about what we've got thus far, but we've got a lot of work to do to keep showcasing and getting customers to try it and demo it. You know, it's an exciting time to be on the S13 Powertrain team. I'll tell you that.
Well, you know what? It's always an exciting time to have a winner.
It is, and it's been, it's like I said, I've been around international a long, long time, and I've seen us when we haven't had quite the same winning hand like we do today. So it feels like you never want to take it for granted. You never want to rest on your laurels. We've got very stout competitors out there. You got smart competitors, but we stay focused on trying to deliver the best we can for our customers. And that's where I think the winning hand we've got with the S13 is really starting to come together for us.
So a lot of bullet point benefits to having the S13 from what you've already shared with us and different things that I've read. So first things first, you got the improved fuel economy, reduced components, so no EGR cooler, no variable geometry turbo, and all that stuff. Reduced complexity of the engine, and by all that, combining all that, you got to reduce weight, and so in overall, you're supposed to have says here that we should be looking at a much lower cost of ownership.
Yeah, exactly. And so the the lighter weight powertrain comes from just having some simplified components. We put a little bit more mass into the transmission just to make sure that it was designed stout. You didn't want that to be a problem area, and so it feels like it was. Again, I can't take credit because I wasn't on the engineering program team, but the engineering team, reduced complexity and mass where it made sense, added a little bit of mass like in the transmission where it was necessary, and overall, the best performing fuel economy and the lightest weight powertrain in the 13-liter space. My summary that I like to leave customers with is that. We've got something for everyone in this. The superior economy of the S13 is for owners. They got, best in class fuel economy. So that's right into their pocketbook. Right. Drivers love the stellar performance because of the way it shifts so smoothly, and it's quiet, and it really pulls up a hill like they weren't expecting. And then finally, the simplicity of the design speaks to the service techs who are thrilled that they can navigate around this thing, and that it's, a waste-gated turbo. Oh my goodness, this is so simple. I love it, right? So again, we've got kind of something in there for everyone.
Yeah, so everybody wins. From the accounting department, the bean counters are going to be thrilled because all of a sudden trucks are going to be getting a couple miles more per gallon, a hell of a lot less downtime, which affects bottom line.
Yep.
Your dispatch managers are going to be thrilled because freight won't be late, because we all know trucks, no matter where you go, you see new trucks at the side of the road because they need a regen or whatever. All these thing, you guys seem to have solved it all. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. There's a lot that we put into it. A lot of cubic dollars and engineering time. But the exciting thing is the early returns are incredibly gratifying. That we feel optimistic. And again, it's not time to rest on our laurels, right? This industry does not stand still. And in fact, kind of the next significant change we've got coming at us are the 2027 regulations.
Right.
So you read my mind. Well, I got a question.
Okay, Rico, fire when ready.
Maybe put a hat on and people stop reading your mind.
So I noticed that in a lot of car manufacturers, I know that Mercedes-Benz and even Porsche, since that's part of Volkswagen, with some of their cars, they have integrated battery technology along with the engines. Is that kind of like building a hybrid? Is that something, I know with all the different things with the regulations and stuff like that, are those kind of, I don't know if you can really speak to any of that, or that is that too much, are we getting too much into any type of proprietary information that you might be able to release? But is that something along the lines that maybe international may be investigating, doing, maybe coming along down the road with a hybrid engine, battery engine type deal, or are there any plans to kind of for the electrification, which a lot of us are not really crazy about? At first I was like, hey, electric sounds great.
Yeah.
but seeing some of the real world applications of this stuff happening out here with some of the stuff that's already out, I've kind of, my enthusiasm has faded, so to speak. So just a question: is that something that maybe international, the hybrid component, or are they looking at a full electrification thing maybe down the road? If that's something that you can speak to at this time.
Yeah, I can cover some of the high points without getting into the nitty gritty proprietary details. At a high level, I start with the S13, right? I like telling customers, you can begin your decarbonization journey today with a purchase of an S13 powertrain, because carbon footprint reduction is directly related to fuel economy improvement, right? So every gallon of diesel that you save is a reduction in carbon output, right? So you don't have to wait until, I can buy battery electric vehicles, right? You can begin your journey today. I fundamentally believe that is important. As you know, the one planet that we all call home. I want to make sure, leave the politics aside, I want to make sure that we're leaving this for future generations, ideally in a better place than how we inherited. If we can improve things by just cleaning the atmosphere and reducing our carbon footprint, then I'm all for it. The S13 can help with that. To your point about, where we're going, couple things strike me. One, we designed this engine not to just have a shelf life of 3 years. Ideally, we're probably going to still be building this integrated powertrain till perhaps 2040 or even longer.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
I believe diesels have a fairly long tail. I also believe that battery electric vehicles are really kind of the future that I think we're going to have. It's the speed at which we get there that I think we've all, especially in the last 18 months, the conversation has really said, boy, this is not easy to stick the landing on getting BEVs introduced. Talk to a lot of fleets and a lot of customers that the infrastructure isn't ready, and it's expensive to put in charging systems.
That's it.
But I also look at, in my lifetime, I'm probably older than both you guys, but the cell phone, right? When it used to be this big brick the size of a loaf of bread,
Right.
that you could talk on for 20 minutes, and it was freakishly expensive, but you had this cool thing. You could walk around without a wire and you could talk to people. And then it became the thing about the size of a thick candy bar, right? And then that lasted for maybe a couple hours. And now we've all got these elegant things that battery lasts all day. It's thin. You can slip it in your pocket. And that's just been in the last, call it 20 years of battery performance improvement. If you apply that same type of thinking, we don't need to have too many improvements in the size and power density of the batteries for motive power for commercial vehicles before all of a sudden you get to what they call the tipping point, right? Where, hey, the TCO puts it in favor of batteries. Full disclosure, man, we are not there today.
Yeah.
And I think it's not for lack of trying. I think there's a lot of smart people that are trying to solve this riddle as fast as possible. But if you think of the transition from horses to horseless carriages a century ago, probably went through much the same thing, right? Where do I get this gasoline stuff? And you had to buy, I think gasoline was mostly like a paint thinner that you'd find at the hardware store.
Right.
So you planned your
Apparently,
trips
I
around
read
where's a
about it.
hardware store,
You're
right?
right.
We're kind of back into that. So Rico, to your point about hybrids, earlier in my career, I was heavily involved on our school bus platform where we had some hybrid technology, and at least at that time, and now this was around 2009 or 10. The initial excitement and the allure of it was quickly replaced with the pragmatics of it was probably just not ready for prime time at that point. But having some batteries and some combustion, in some ways, that like in the automotive realm, it kind of allows you to avoid the range anxiety of battery only, and allows you to still play to those people that go, yeah, hey, I'm familiar with combustion engine. I think that makes more sense in passenger cars. In commercial vehicles, fundamentally, you're going to have two very expensive systems, because moving around, an 80,000 pound interstate tractor trailer rig in the United States, or for the Canadians that can go to 63.5 metric tons for B doubles, or trying to remember, 110,000 pound GCW is the one I remember is also common up north there. You're going to have some very expensive needs of both of those systems to be able to move it around. So effectively, you're almost doubling the cost. It's not, unlike automotive, where you can get away with it, I think, a little better. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but I think what we're going to see.
One size does not fit all.
One size does not fit all. Correct. And so the real punchline I give to this question is that it's too early to place all your bets, because there's hydrogen in the combustion cycle, there's fuel cell, there's hybrids, there's full BEV. I will say, International is part of the Traton group within Volkswagen. We're heavily skewing towards battery electric vehicles, just because that's where we believe long term the trends seem to us to be heading that way. I personally think the conversations around hydrogen sound exciting at a superficial level, but when you start peeling back the onion and get to some of the details of what hydrogen all entails,
right?
If you think the electrical infrastructure isn't ready for commercial vehicles, at least I've got a light switch I can turn. I know where I can get electricity. Hydrogen, I don't have a hydrogen pond in my backyard to go fill up a tank, right? I mean, I'm being a bit glib, to make the point, but I think we'll see battery technology gains in the next decade that are going to help solve some of the range and power density issues faster than we're going to see someone successfully build out a hydrogen infrastructure. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, as they say, it's better to row the boat in the direction of the stream than versus rowing it reverse upstream, because you get the synergy of the momentum going that direction. So it's definitely, it seems as if more adopters are going the way of battery electric versus what, like you were saying, versus the other options that are out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that, Rico. That's it's a lot easier to swim with the current than against it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I appreciate, David. I'm looking at the time, and we don't want to. I know you got a little bit of free time since the Bears aren't playing today, but we don't want to take all of the time.
David, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough on behalf of Rico and me and our listeners, having you on, and we hope we can get you on again. You have really enlightened us on this wonderful technology you guys have developed. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm grateful and I'm thrilled to have been asked to participate. I'd love to participate again. I think you guys I love what you're doing with your podcast. You guys really came prepared with a lot of really good questions. We are super excited about what this S13 integrated powertrain is doing for us. But like I said, our job is not done. We gotta keep earning customers' business the right way. And it's exciting times around international. But guys, really appreciate the time today and the opportunity to talk with you about my favorite powertrain.
I want to go. I want to go. Definitely go and maybe go visit a dealership and go check them out. I tell you who's going to be excited.
Rico,
I tell you who's going to be really excited though, Chuck. Good friend of the show, Ray Veneman.
Yeah,
because they are an international dealer up there, and a good friend of the show here, David. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ray.
That's how we got David.
That's right. I know some of Ray's colleagues. I don't know Ray personally, but you know what, guys? I will be drummed out of the core if I don't at least say, hey, look, your local international dealer, we're proud to have the industry's largest dealer network. Your local international dealer has got demo units available, so you can get behind the wheel. I can tell you all sorts of great things about it, but you need to experience it yourself. And the other thing, we've got 2 trailers going throughout the US and Canada. Some of your listeners may have seen them going down the roads. They're pretty eye-catching. The S13 trailer tour is making stops at all sorts of international dealers. It's a great way to spend an afternoon, maybe get some free hot dogs, but to learn about the powertrain from some experts, kind of get hands-on to see some of the components I've discussed here today. But if there's anything I can do, any of your listeners interested in getting a chance to drive one, let us know through the podcast channel, and we can hook you up with your local international dealer.
Absolutely. Before we let you get out of here, David, if you would like to, by all means, how can people get in contact with you or find you, or where would you direct them to get more information?
Fantastic.
Other than just what you just mentioned with
other than through the podcast, 2 ways to get a hold of me. One, I am on LinkedIn. So David Hillman, and my email address is david.hillman@navistar.com. We still haven't changed our email address, but it'll probably be changing at some point. But we've been Navistar for a long time. That's the last place we still use it. But I'd encourage anyone who's got questions or comments, please reach out to me that way or through the podcast, whichever they prefer. But super honored and privileged to have a chance to chat with both of you today.
Sounds great. We appreciate you for taking the time out to do so. Good luck to your Bears the rest of the way.
And good luck to your Panthers. This is why they play the game, Rico, right?
I hope we go ahead and lose out so we can actually get a high draft pick. So.
There are some good-looking QBs in next year's draft. I'm sure no one would knowingly tank, but there's maybe a hope around the corner. But hey, thanks, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it again, David. Thanks. And so with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you guys for taking the time to also join us and listen to the podcast. By all means, if you found anything that we talked about today entertaining or insightful, please do us a huge favor. It doesn't cost you a dime. Subscribe to the show and actually share with a friend. Tell a friend to tell a friend about the podcast. And with that being said, Chuck, how can the people get in contact with you?
Just send me an email with your phone number, chucksnow280@outlook.com. And with that, Rico, I'm going to let you back. We're in a hole for another week.
Well, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, for our guest, David Hillman of International, we want to thank him for taking the time out to join us. And for my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow, we want to say to you guys, stay safe out there, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise, and God willing, we'll talk at you same time, same place next week. God bless you and good night.
Catch on a flip-flop.
Thanks again, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.